Hello, the old original game of words in which much of the teasing is done by Frank Muir.
Oh. Good evening. And what happier sentence could any captain of team start with than the first member of my team is the gorgeous Sheila Hancock. For my next guest, the part of Richard Wattis is played by that exemplary actor, Richard Wattis.
When you hear a pun that's got a wooden leg and two glass eyes, be sure it comes from Geoffrey Wheeler.
Thank you. The lady next to me is called Isobel. Isobel, she insists with an O. Not that she need worry, because I'm sure there isn't a man among us who would not greet her with an O or even an R, or not to say, Well, test your reactions for yourselves, gentlemen, when I introduce Isobel Black. If the man on my right is as quick at spotting the correct meanings of words as he is for finding rhymes for them, then we're in to make some hay this evening. I'd like you to meet that ace of the ad-lib in the Calypso, Lance Percival.
That obtains for us the first word, which is hickboo, and I should simply tell you Frank Muir and his team are going to define, I should say, not identify. Oh, dear. Three different ways. Hickboo, three different ways. There's only one true one, of course. That's the one that Geoffrey Wheeler's team is going to try and guess. I should say deduce. So, Frank Muir, hickboo.
Good evening. A hickboo, quite obviously, is an American word. It probably comes, I think it might well come from a play, in fact. And what it means is, it refers to something which there's a lot of about in television, in news and documentaries. It's a non-event. And it's an American word for a non-event. It's rather like opening the garage doors and pushing out a hand mower. A hickboo, a ridiculous late 19th century American word for a non-event.
Splendid. Richard Wattis.
Hickboo actually goes back to the Zeppelin raids in the First World War, actually. That's a private joke between all of us. So it's really a name for an air raid. And the boys in the, I suppose, then Royal Flying Corps used to listen and say, I say, chaps, now a hickboo. And they'd down their pints and get into their little pups or whatever they were and give Jerry hell.
Can't have private jokes on a public programme like this. We just told him not to say actually too much, because if everyone says actually, by George, it's like a sandbag right at the back of the neck. Anyway, so I hope everyone will take that as more of a bludgeon than a hint. Anyway, Sheila Hancock.
Well, that's all a load of rubbish that they were saying. A hickboo is something that I wish I'd heard of before. It's something that Sinhalese mothers give to their babies. Shut up, Frank. It's a sort of comforter or dummy, and at the same time it's a teething ring. It's a marvellous idea. It's a short stick. And the very favourite sort of hickboo for little Sinhalese babies is a bamboo sugar thing, so that it's like a lollipop at the same time. It's a good idea. That's a hickboo, a stick.
It's a Sinhalese dummy, she says. It's a non-happening, it's an air raid. Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, starting first of all with Sheila, the hickory, sounds like hickory, which sounds like some sort of a stick, I was thinking, but I don't think it's Sinhalese. I don't think it's the dummy. The air raid, I wasn't convinced of that, well, as Richard told it, because Frank Muir, remembering the Zeppelin raid so well, would have looked much less happy than he did at the time. No, in fact, I'm going to go for Frank's opening the garage doors, bringing out the lawnmower, and the word hickboo as a non-event.
So he said that, he did. True or bluff, was it?
I do remember the Zeppelins. I was on our side.
Well done. Well done. Who can it have been? I wonder who gave us the true definition of that word. Comrade Wattis. when he said it was actually that. Anyway, we'll have another word. Score standing at 1-0. Qual is the next one. Geoffrey Wheeler, your turn.
A common cause of absenteeism in British schools in the winter is a nasty cold on the chest. An equally common cause of absenteeism from schools in the Far East is qual on the abacus. Now, let me explain. A qual is the non-moving part of the abacus, and the abacus, as I'm sure you know, Sheila does, of course, is the ancient counting machine which is used in backward countries as a computer. You simply move the beads along the strings. And the qual, which in backward countries is spelt E-L-R-A-U-Q, is any one of the horizontal wires or bars upon which or along which the beads are moved in order to count. Qual.
Must have missed a pun there somewhere. It's buried there somewhere. If we could dig it out, disinter it. Lance Percival.
Well, my abacus parts are moving at the moment, so... But I could tell you that a qual is a regional adjective from Northumbria, meaning arrogant, supercilious, haughty, and holier than thou, which I think you might say is an admirable description of Frank Muir as a Zeppelin commander. Not only applicable to people, though, Frank, it's also applicable to greyhounds, who are too well bred to chase the common hare. Many a punter has been heard to shout, "There goes that filthy qual at the back." That's a qual.
I think the greyhound bit's a better description of Frank.
Isobel Black.
A qual is a large fire brick. It differs from other bricks in that it is not oblong, it is curved, rather like a slice of melon. Therefore it follows it is used in building round buildings. It was often the cylindrical support from an alchemist's melting pot. He used to stir up all his potions on top of a building made of quartz.
Right, well, it's part of an abacus. It's a fire brick. It means haughty. Frank Muir.
We dismiss, I say, not in the editorial or monarchical sense, but we had a little conference while the camera was off. We unanimously dismiss Geoffrey's abacus, which, as far as I'm concerned, is just a dead zither and has no moving parts apart from the beads. We also don't much care, much care for Isobel, but not terribly for the fire bricks. And we plump, if that's the right word.
It always you, Frank, it must be.
For arrogant, for the arrogant whippet.
Well, he did say that, so was that...
Such rubbish, it must be right.
Was that true or bluff? Let him seize his opportunity. It's a bluff. 2-1?
It was.
Isobel Black was right when she said it was that kind of fire. 1-1. And the next word is songle. Richard Wattis.
Well, a songle is actually one of 6 parts of wood which temporarily buttress up the wall of a failing building. That's what a songle is, which is really all we're really interested in. But I would like to say, at the risk of shocking you rather, that one of the other pieces of wood is called a squinch.
You are zany.
Sheila Hancock.
Well, for the first time in my life, this is a word that I knew before this programme. Usually they're complete mysteries to me. This is something that I did at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. It's, in fact, a word for a voice exercise. It, in fact, is a, sort of a song without words. It's the tonic solfa. It's, you know, at school when you do those things where you go, do, mi, so, fa, ti, you know, the teacher points at the board. Well, that's called a songle.
So it had to be called something, I suppose. Frank Muir.
Ah, yes, well, you're in the country, and it's a lovely day, and you dip your hand into needing breakfast, say, so you dip your hand into a sack of corn, and you pull out, what's the word? Oh, you pull out a songle, because that is what a songle is. A songle is a handful of gleaned corn. I will confess that it is not a word that you meet up with all that much, although you probably would meet up with it if you were a chicken fancier or a chap with a battery hen system, because a songle is what a hen eats a day, 1 songle a day.
Keeps the doctor away.
So, it's a handful of corn, something our viewers may be familiar with, a singing exercise, or part of a buttress. Lance?
I believe that if Sheila sang her songle like that, she would have left the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art a long time ago.
Don't know she did. Right. You never know.
Dickie Wattis is wood, not the squinch, the songle part. Well, actually, neither of them, I'm afraid, I believe in. However, Frank Muir and Coren seem to be well associated on this occasion.
Very true.
So I'll plump for Frank Muir's songle of corn.
We really ought to have the word plump on this programme. True or bluff, was it, Frank? No. Ka-choo!
Oh.
Very good. Splendid. Score stands 2-1 in favour of Geoffrey Wheeler's team. At this point, slight variation, not a word, but an object lurking under here. This is it. I show it to you now. Geoffrey Wheeler's team is going to describe this thing 3 different ways. And then Frank Muir and his people are going to try and pick the right one. So, first of all, Lance Percival, what is it?
Well, this object comes from the Cameroons in British West Africa. In fact, you can see just inside, made in British West Africa, sometimes. And it is used because they have a baruba in British West Africa, Cameroons, which is like a corn of the cob, about 2 foot long, and it is inserted in one end or the other, and you hold on to one end and hold on to this baruba with the other end, and then you put your mouth in here, and you are twisting it around so you can eat it at the same time. And you take it out again and say, that was damn good baruba, man.
But what are those little holes at the back for?
Therefore, the excess pips you're not liking.
Of course. Silly me to ask. Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, this admittedly unremarkable object is in fact of considerable age. It was found at Chedworth in Gloucestershire, which, as you may know, is the site of a Roman bath, was for a time the headquarters of the 10th Legion, and was the scene in about, I think it was 4 BC, of a very nasty outbreak of centurion's foot. You see, it's a lavapedium, and that's Latin for foot sprayer. Now, in the Roman baths following this, these things were installed, about 18 inches off the floor, about a foot away from the wall, you had cold water running through a pipe here. You had steam coming in at right angles from water which had been heated. This mixed with the water and made for warm water, which then ran through, you see the little holes here? It ran through those holes, and you simply took off your sandals and wiggled your toes under there, and after a forced march with the 10th Legion, it was delicious. A lavapedium.
How revolting.
Isobel, your turn now.
Well, this very curious object is a mole catcher. People in Sussex will probably recognise it because they have a sort of large amount of moles in Sussex, and they use these. The string goes round here, string at each end. Here's string, and it goes through the top and through these little holes underneath. It ties onto a bent stick. The unfortunate moles, who are always crawling through things like this, get caught in the middle by the string and chew through it, and are immediately strangled. Very unfortunate. It's a mole catcher.
But, will they crawl through, if you just put one down, they crawl through anything that looks like that?
Well, if you have moles, you usually have a vast quantity of them, and if you leave these lying around, they all crawl through them.
Run through them. Foolish moles. Well, it's a baruba holder. It's a mole catcher. It's a Roman foot sprayer. Richard Wattis, your schwa.
Not allowed to ask them, am I?
Oh,
right.
no.
All right, no.
No.
What do you want?
I have a feeling, that this centurion's foot, I think it's quite a possibility, but it does look a terribly new one. It's sort of, been sort of tarted up.
Can we ask whether
use an old Roman expression.
You can ask, Frank, but I've no idea. I don't believe it is. I can only give you my supposition that it's not a reproduction.
No, not a reproduction.
I believe it's the genuine article, whatever it is.
Well, then I think...
allowed to admit whether it was a replica or not.
What?
We were allowed to admit whether it's a replica or not.
And is it a replica?
I'm not saying it. I mean, you're doing the judging.
It's
Well,
my
anyway,
impression.
well,
That's a lot
It's
of
my
books.
impression that it isn't, but I can't swear to
Well,
it.
so, as I say, it seems a very tarted up bit of old Rome, and I'm not absolutely convinced that that's what it is. The Baruba thing is, I suppose, possible, but I wasn't absolutely happy about the little holes being for pips. If it had been for an excess of butter or even, ground nuts or things like that, possibly.
I suppose the translation of Baruba is cornucopia.
Might be a
Cornucopia.
cornucopia, yes, it might be. But I don't really think that I really am rather inclined to think it is a mole catcher. I'm not absolutely convinced that they get strangled, but I think it's a mole catcher.
Well, if it is, it should be reported to the RSPCA.
Yes.
Should be reported to the moles. Well, whoever gave the true description of that object should now wave it about a bit.
I shall remain holding it.
There you are. You're quite right, Mrs. Wattis. It's a mole catcher. Wasn't that clever? Wasn't that really awesome? And that mole catcher came from the Brighton Museum, and I'm sure they wouldn't harbour a mere reproduction, and I don't suppose you need to with a mole catcher.
No, but it should have been.
But moles must be pretty stupid. Yes, quite. Yes, it would. The edges are too sharp. You were too sharp, too. Too all. Somerset, Sheila Hancock.
Oh dear, this is going to get me such a bad reputation in Somerset, but I've got to say it. This has got the name. It's in fact a name for a bandy-legged man.
Why you look at me?
And it originated because tradition has it that in Somerset the men are so bandy that they can walk across a barrel of cider without touching it. I do apologise to everybody in Somerset, but it's a fact. So there you are. That's in fact what a Somerset.
Oh, they put up with more than that in their time, I dare say. Frank Muir.
Yes. Can't get it out. A Somerset is a somersault done by a man of Kent. Or, in fact, a Kentish man.
Is that all you're going to say?
Somersault done by a Kentish man or man of Kent.
You've no wish to say more. You feel that that's enough.
I would like to rest my case.
Yes.
if I may.
Well, yes, quite. Leave us to chew it over. Richard Wattis.
A Somerset is an exceptionally comfortable saddle on a horse. It's padded, so the knee can rest against padding, and if you won't think me indelicate, it's also padded behind the thigh. Actually, I've done it again, but still, actually, it really was. It was the invention of a certain Lord Fitzroy Somerset, who later became Lord Raglan, and he had sort of arms and shoulder pieces named after him.
Seems excessive. Well, it's a Kentish somersault. One who is bandy and lives in Somerset, or padded saddle. Isobel.
I think, having been to Somerset and never heard the phrase...
They
Well,
might
it's
have
not
kept
used
it
in
from you,
Somerset,
you know.
I see.
Could be used in Broadstairs.
They were being nice.
I haven't seen anybody particularly... I see. Anyway, I don't agree with that one. No. The saddle sounds very convincing, all those historical facts. I'm almost inclined to think I've been on one, the way you put it, but I'm going to discard that and go for the ridiculous. A somersault done by a Kentish man over something else? Very intriguing.
Well, he just left it at that. He just left... Oh, wait. Are you choosing that, are you?
I am choosing that.
You are indeed, true or bluff. He's a little eager. From what?
Oh.
From which you may surmise a bluff. You can always tell when it's going to be you've lost. Who gave the true one? Comrade Wattis did. Padded saddle. Padded saddle.
Well, we were a bit staggered at that because all of us had heard the word.
Yes.
We were going to sort of complain to the management, and then we thought it'd be rather sort of
You've
craven
heard of the word
Somerset as a saddle.
as a saddle.
We were going to get it, but we thought it was too easy.
Well, I congratulate
That's
you.
why
I
we
mean,
kept
now,
it.
not only have you won, but you want to be patted on the back as well. For yes, oh, no, tush, tush.
Or just
tush.
money.
3-2, quite so. 3-2, and we have Strome, Isobel Black.
Strome is a Lincolnshire duck pond. A large pool of stagnant water on which you will find one or more ducks. It also has a verb in association. You can go stroming. At least you could go stroming. It was used to throw to dunk witches in the pond, the village pond, to rid them of their evil spirits. Used to go out and strome your witch.
Yes. Well, Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, a little while ago I was going up to London. I went up to London and I took a friend from the country and I parked the car in one of those rather leafy roads off Cromwell Road, which you probably know. And we went around the town and came back again. And my friend said, you've been stromed, I see. Now, all I saw was the ticket that the warden had left on the window, but what he'd noticed was the nasty, tacky marks all over the car. You see, it is very unwise to park your car under a lime tree in summertime, because the lime trees drip a sort of sticky sap, which scientists call palladium, but which countrymen, such as the one who was with me, refer to as strome.
Lancelot.
Very good, very good. Well, but actually, to strome is to walk with long strides. As you'll probably remember in fairy tales, one would strome with your 7-league boots on, whatever they may be. And you'll probably recall the word best when I remind you of Kenneth Williams's famous rendition of Sir Harry Lauder's song, I'm a stroming in the gloaming. Yeah. That is stroming.
So it's taking big strides. It's sap from a lime tree. Duck pond. Sheila Hancock.
Yes, it's not the walking on the duck pond thing, I'm sure. And I've had that thing on my car, and I don't think it's called strome. Well, I've never called it strome. I've called it Roosevelt. I think it's the Kenneth Williams song. I think it means walking.
Taking big
Strolling.
strides. Lance Percival, true or bluff, is that?
No, I think it's very nasty. Yeah.
True.
I'm so
4-2. I have another one. Esgard. That's how you pronounce it, Frank Muir.
Esgard. Esgard is a Scottish word, and it means a legal pamphlet or leaflet on which you can print the names of people who owe you money. Creditors, in fact. It's kind of... It's done in the south as well. It's done south of the border, and chaps go around in vans with blacklists of people. But that's, in fact, an Esgard, and it's a kind of legal blackmail finish.
Richard Wattis.
It's a heraldic term. It's, rather like bar sinister, when the lady and gentleman who became involved with each other didn't sort of bother to get married at the end of it and produced offspring. And so if you had a fabulous coat of arms, pretty as paint, but you had an Esgard on it, it meant that the whole world knew your secret.
Sheila Hancock.
Well, Esgard is in fact a collective noun, rather like, you say a gaggle of geese, or a giggle of Frank Muir's, or a pride of lions, or whatever.
A charm of Frank Muir.
Yes, a charm of Frank Muir's, quite right.
Thank you.
And in this particular occasion, it means, in fact, a gathering of knights of St. John's. And in other words, pardon? No, old knights.
Oh, old.
Knights of old. Knights of old. If your group of them were around a table talking, you would say it was an escort of the Knights of St. John.
It's a gathering of knights. It's an heraldic device. It's a list of debtors. Geoffrey Wheeler.
I have no idea at all. I don't think it's a list of debtors. The Esgard sounds More like a toothpaste than something out of heraldry. No, I'm going to settle for the gaggle, was it, of Knights of St. John? I'm going to settle for the gathering of Knights of St. John.
That was Sheila Hancock.
That was Sheila Hancock,
wasn't it? True or bluff?
Sheila said that.
It's going to be a bluff.
Oh, well done. And since we have time for one more word, who knows, but it may end in a draw. Much anyone cares. Flotter, Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, the venerable verb flotter describes the action of bathwater if the taps are allowed to run on indefinitely, which is a characteristic they have in common with Frank Muir. Now, flotter means to overflow, and if you don't believe me and plump for somebody else's definition, then my cup of happiness will flotter accordingly.
Plump, 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 we all plump. Lance Percival.
A flotter has nothing to do with plumping for Frank Muir, actually. A flotter
You've got
is...
them all in there.
No,
I'll give you 10 out of 10.
A flotter is a small, single-masted sailing vessel that was once commonly used on the River Medway. It's particularly distinguishing from other small sailing boats because of its curved wooden canopy over the stern. Nice. Which protects the passengers from the wind and the weather. That's a flotter. Flotter.
Isobel Black.
A flotter is an exceptionally comfortable North Country moccasin, so you can pad up and down Coronation Street in your pair of flotters. It's made from the soft underbelly of the sheep. That's where they take the leather from. It's lined with sheep's wool. And every man should go home and put his flotters on in the evening.
Right, it's a ferry boat, it's a moccasin, it means to overflow. Frank Muir, fairly swiftly, if you please.
How swiftly?
Well, fairly, you know, up to a
Can I
point.
sing,
Lord Copper.
I've got a flotter? Or, no, we
You've
don't
said it.
think
You've said it,
it's
damn you.
no, we don't think it's the overflow. Geoffrey out. The sailing vessel was very good, and might well be that, but we're plumping for Isobel's moccasin.
Isobel's moccasin, true or bluff? Oh, she looks rather smug.
Yes, does.
It's a bluff. A very swift, true one, please. Who gave the true one? Geoffrey Wheeler, and it means to overflow. It means to overflow. Score stands 4-all. How delicate, how delightful. No one falls out, no recriminations, no winners at all. I think they both ought to get clapped. And will, I know that. We'll be back next time to give the Voronov treatment to some more oldies. Until when, goodbye from Richard Wattis, Lance Percival, Sheila Hancock, Isobel Black, Frank Muir, Geoffrey Wheeler,
Good night.
and goodbye. Good evening. This is where we take the halt and the lame from the Oxford English Dictionary and stretch them on the rack, grinning fiendishly as he turns the wheel. Geoffrey Wheeler.
If you have colour television, then you are in for a delight. One of the 7 wonders of the world of entertainment. The eyes of Isobel Black. If you were watching the programme last week, you'll remember that my other guest had trouble with corn in his baruba. Much better this week is Lance Percival.
Ever ready to torture a meaning from a word until it screams for mercy, Frank Muir.
And good evening. My first guest has been elected Ladies After Dinner Speaker of the Year. And I'm sure you... What?
It wasn't just ladies.
Well, After Dinner Speaker of the Year. And yes, but I'm sure that you'll know that Rudyard Kipling's saying is refuted that the female speeches are more deadly than the male when I say that the speaker and my guest is Sheila Hancock.
Isn't that nice? Why can't he say something nice, like Geoffrey Wheeler said about Isobel Black about my eyes being one of the 7 wonders of the world? Charming.
It was nice. I refuted Kipling on your behalf.
I see.
My next guest, you know, the backbone of show business are not superstars and those huge great stars, but that select band of actors and performers who never ever give less than a marvellous performance. And just such a man is my number 2, Richard Wattis.
I thought that was the game. Damn it, now we have to play one. Well, I ring the bell, we get the first word. Well, it's a good one, goont. And Geoffrey Wheeler and his team are going to define this word, goont, in 3 different ways. There must be at least 3. And Frank Muir and his people are going to pick the right one if they're lucky. So, first of all, Geoffrey Wheeler, goont.
Well, goont is a paste. It's a steely blue-coloured paste which Malays scrape off the inside bark of the akorapa tree, which is a dwarf relation of the eucalyptus tree. And as the paste is usually situated in the most inaccessible part of the tree, it's usually scraped off by a dwarf relation of the Malays. If some years ago you were a white hunter and you were invited upriver to a party, as you stepped ashore from your canoe, the nicest thing you could say to your host would be, "My word, you're looking pasty," because this would be a great compliment. It cost a lot of beads, this stuff, and they used to use it as ancient Britons used woad to beautify their bodies. It's a beautifying paste. Goont.
Lance Percival.
He went on a bit, didn't he? I mean, he went on for hours. A goont is nothing to do with Peter Sellers and that mob. It is a measure of weight for unpolished rice, for rice in its raw state, as sold and found, of course, in the southeast provinces of India, you see. A goont is roughly equivalent to 27.5 hundredweight avoir du pois, which means you can be having peas with your rice. Very clever stuff tonight, folks. It's all down here. And thus, with a single goont, you can be covering the whole of the, say, the centre court of Wimbledon with rice pudding. I am finished talking now, then.
Well, having very thoroughly patronised the third world, we pass on to Isobel Black.
I shall be brief. A goont is a near neighbour of the abominable snowman, being a small pony that you find in the Himalayas. You could never say as clumsy as a goont, because it's extremely nimble-footed. It lives off sort of stunted growth that it digs out of avalanches. It is, in fact, a small pony.
Right, so it's a measure of rice, it's a pony, it's a Malayan face paint. Frank Muir.
All you ticked is goont. That's no help. Well, you don't think so, do you?
Yes.
Shall we go on what it is?
Oh,
It's utterly mad. Well,
Sorry, I do beg your pardon.
One has this effect sometimes, even on Speakers of the Year. I think it's absolute rubbish, actually. This is entirely, listening millions, this is entirely Richard Wattis's thought. He doesn't think it's the rice pudding or the pony. I think it's the pony, but he thinks, and I'm willing to expose his judgment to the viewing millions, he thinks it's Geoffrey's eucalyptus paste.
The face paint, yes. True or bluff? No, it wasn't the face.
Take full responsibility.
I wonder who gave the true definition of that word.
The pony.
Yes, it was. It was the pony.
Now you're going to say you
Goont
thought
is
it
a
was
sort
the
of
pony
pony.
all along.
We'll have another word, and that word is fuggle.
Really?
Frank Muir, fuggle.
What? I'm not ready yet. I haven't done my book work. Fuggle. Good evening. A fuggle
We've met you.
is a man-made barrier of natural substance. In other words, it's twigs and undergrowth twisted together to form a barrier to stop other things getting across to somewhere else, such as the top of a wall to stop sheep going. And if the Afghanistan war, at the top of the Khyber Pass, the Afghanistans used this of mountain oak. But it wasn't called fuggle, it was an Afghanistan word, so I shouldn't really have mentioned it.
Richard Wattis.
A fuggle is a hop, not as you might imagine, a local dance. Not like that at all. It's for brewing beer. And rather amusingly, it was called a fuggle after Mr. Fuggle, who grew it first in his garden. Clever man. And in point of fact, it's very hardy and it grows very well, but at the risk of offending Mr. Fuggle, it is rather coarse.
Who isn't?
Right, Sheila Hancock.
A fuggle is a wooden mould for shaping the crowns of hats. It's almost like a wig stand, Isobel, you know what I mean. And what they do is they put the crown of the hat on and they steam it, felt hats, and they steam it into shape, And the person who works this thing, this fuggle, should be called a fuggler, but he isn't, so...
Probably is by his family.
Yes, Mr. Fuggler the Fuggle.
It's a hat crowner, it's a hop, it's a barrier. Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, I'm completely befuddled. I really don't know at all. The wooden mould for the hats sounds very... It sounds like an old tradey implement, doesn't it, Lance? You have it in your West Country? You have fuggles there?
Well, I don't know. I didn't have no fuggles in my hats down there.
Well, in that case,
I kept my fuggles somewhere else, I'll tell you that.
I think you were wise. There's a lot of fuggle knickers about these days. There's been a great shortage nationally. No, I don't really think there was a Mr. Fuggle who had the hops. If there was, he has my sympathy, both on account of his coarseness and his name. I'm going to settle for a barrier of twigs, or whatever it may be called in Afghanistan.
It's probably called a barrier of twigs. Frank Muir, true or bluff?
Bluff. It is, you see.
Well done. And the true definition, who gave that?
Richard again.
None other than Richard Wattis.
It's another one.
I said it was a hop, and a hop it was. 1-1. Have another word. It's culching. Lance Percival.
Culching has to do with the welfare of young oysters. Oysters too young, in fact, to even know the dangers of R in the month. I hope you all know what that means.
Yes.
I had to look it up. It's it's a strewing of an oyster bed. You can when you're culching, you strew an oyster bed. If you're that sort of filthy person.
What do you strew it with?
I'll come to that,
He's
dear.
getting there.
With little rocks and pebbles which the little oysters can cling to. So they do not go out to sea and drown dead. They cling on because you are culching. Isn't that nice?
It's a cultured pearl.
Isobel Black.
Culching is a fairly mild form of bindweed, and I know all about it because our garden is full of every species of bindweed at the moment. We have a larger variety on top of the holly tree. But this one is mild, and it grows along the ground. It grows mostly on cravey paving and on rock beds, rock gardens. That is culching.
She's clever, that girl.
Geoffrey Wheeler.
Just occasionally one is glad that one's life has taken the course it has. I grew up for a time in the country, and so this is a word that comes back from early childhood. But in fact, it's a word that goes back way beyond my childhood. But for a culching, Paul Revere would never have made it. You see, it's a device for stopping the girth of a horse's saddle, the bit that goes round its tongue, from slipping. When a horse works up a sweat and makes its tummy slippery, and the saddle stops shaking your head, I'm telling you the truth. It slips around. And a culching is a piece of roughened leather which is sewn under the girth, where it acts as a sort of anti-skid pad. Ask any horse that's hot.
Right, yes. Making beds for oysters is what it means. It's a horse's girth, or part of same, or it's a weed that spreads. A weed that spreads.
Form of bindweed.
A mild form of bindweed. Richard Wattis.
Well, Personally, I mean, this again is only my opinion, even if it were a nasty kind of bindweed, I wouldn't be terribly convinced. The oyster bed, kind though the look was in Lance Percival's eyes, you know, as he told us all about it, I don't know, and I'm wholly dissatisfied with this girth thing round a poor stomach of a horse. In fact, I personally am inclined to go for Lance and his looking after oysters.
Who's he going for?
You.
Lance and
Going
his
for
looking
you.
after oysters.
Going for you?
Looking after...
So you have to say true or bluff?
That's what he, as he said, it's a cultured pearl.
Absolutely, well done. Now, the score standing at, it can't be 2-2. No, it quickly adjusted itself to 2-1. Splendid. There must be someone clever behind there. 2-1 in favour of Frank Muir. We now come to a slight variation. We have an object. It lies under here. Frank Muir's team is going to describe this object 3 different ways. Geoffrey Wheeler's team is going to pick the right one. All I must do, therefore, looks a bit like a pea shooter, which I can safely say because I know it isn't. Richard Wattis, what is it?
Well, now, this actually is a device made for listening. This one actually is made for listening into keyholes. As you can see, the thing came up into your ear, and if the keyhole had suffered some damage at any time or another, you had a little sort of bent bit so that you could still hear. It was actually designed by a Mr. Purifoy, who I gather had rather a lot of trouble with his wife. You know, she was a friendly girl, and he always wanted to know what she was at and who she was with. And so that he designed this for, literally, for listening through keyholes.
Frank Muir.
Oh. Oh, yes. This is used by butlers in old houses. If, you know, Malmsey, or those wines that you don't decant, you see, it had sediment in the bottom. Did you know? Pay attention, Isobel. You're not looking at me. Flash me those eyes. Oh, yes. And, you see, you put that down, and, because you can't decant it, to get the sediment, you, like this, and you spat it out on something non-porous, such as cook. You spat it out on something non-porous, such as cook. That's what that is. It's to remove sediment from the bottom of stuff that you... Oh, forget it.
Sheila Hancock.
Well, having just come back from Scotland, this is something that I wish I'd had. It is Scottish, and you use it in bed. It's...
As a listening device,
No! You use it for blowing out candles without getting out of the bedclothes. You keep it under the pillow, or, as you will, you can keep it where you like. But anyway, you're under the bedclothes like this, and you go and blow the candle out, you see?
Cook.
Pardon?
Or cook.
Or blow cook out, whichever you like. That's what it is, a Scottish candle blower out.
Yes. Well, it's a candle snuffer, or of that ilk, and it's a keyhole trumpet, and it's something you get sediment out of wine with. Isobel Black, it's your choice.
Dear. Well, I've never seen it in Scotland. I've never used it in Scotland. I think if you keep it under the pillow or anywhere else in the bed, it might be highly uncomfortable. I'm absolutely flummoxed about the other two. Help. I don't think... do you? I'm just about to kill it. You certainly can't decant Malmsey. I thought you could decant anything, possibly. I'm feminine, I'll be swayed. I will plump for the middle one and deny Richard Wattis with more of historical facts, which probably means it's true. I'll settle for the sediment remover.
That's Frank Muir's description. Well, now, whoever gave the true description of that elegant object should now raise it aloft.
Can't.
Sheila Hancock.
because I remember now, because Liberage has got 600 of them.
Surely it's the other end, surely.
You put the flat bit to your mouth.
Of course you do.
It's jolly
What
handy,
the
actually.
dickens else could you do with it?
I'm going to keep it.
No. Well, there you are. And that object came from the Brighton Museum. Score standing at 3-1. We have Magglemose. Isobel Black.
Magglemose. This is obtained, it's a sort of fluid, a greenish fluid. It's obtained from stinging hairs of a special Sudanese type of stinging nettle. It's used for medicinal purposes. It's especially efficacious for treating bilharzia, which is a disease caused by liver fluke.
Bilharzia, that would be, wouldn't it?
Yes, sorry.
Unless you are
Bilharzia.
on familiar terms with him, and then, of course, he's Bill Harris or Harsey or whatever. Geoffrey Wheeler.
Well, it's a pity, really. You see, they haven't done it properly. The O should have one of those diagonal lines through it, because Mangelmöser is the generic name for prehistoric culture in the shape of burial mounds and things that sort, that is to be found on the western side of Denmark. Now, if you take a stroll inland from the port of Esbjerg, you've got to go. It's no good flying. You see, it's no good going straight to Copenhagen. You go right over the top, and you can't really see them from the air, unless you've got an infrared camera. But if you go by sea to Esbjerg and you take a stroll inland, then you will, on either hand, as they say, see some of these examples of authentic Mangelmöser.
Lancelot.
Yes, Magglemose, not Magglemoses as you might expect, are really fancy overalls for gentlemen. In fact, the most fancy kind of Magglemose would be a velvet number with a little wisp of lace from the collar and the cuffs.
You'd fancy that, wouldn't
In
you?
fact, one would often see people in the King's Road and shout at them, "Have a butcher's at his Magglemose." I've often done it.
I thought you had one on.
No, that's Chelsea football.
Oh, yes. It's a Sudanese specific for bilharzia, fancy overalls, or Danish tumuli, I think you might well refer to them as, if and but. Sheila Hancock.
Well, I don't think it's the stinging nettle for treating William, and I don't think it's the burial mounds, and I'm certainly not going to Denmark to find out. I think it's those camp overalls that Lance was talking about.
The overalls. Was he telling the truth, or was it simply a tease?
Well, this is what they call a Camp Bluff.
Care to tell us who gave the true one?
Oh, really?
Geoffrey Wheeler. By all that I don't know what. The prehistoric cultural remains in Denmark. 2-3. Let's have another word. Mampus, Sheila Hancock.
Ah, yes. Now, Mampus was a vogue word, a fashionable word in the 18th century. It's something, actually, that Dr. Johnson might easily have used. It was a word meaning an awful lot of, more than you can see by just a glance of the eye. I mean, we hope, for instance, that there's Mampus people watching this programme. It's an 18th century word meaning a great many.
Vogue word.
A vogue word, yes. Or a Harper's word, whichever you like.
Frank Muir.
If any of you of nervous disposition, do go to bed now. If you've ever bruised your toe,
It's not funny yet, is it, Frank?
it's not funny at all. A mampus grows under the toenail, and it's nature's way of sloughing off the sort of horny stuff that grows in between the toe and the nail. And I'm awfully sorry, and I do apologise. Mampus.
Richard Wattis.
Mampus is a very, very boring and totally uninteresting variety of porous sandstone. It actually grows near a lake, Asoli, about 80 miles northwest and northeast of Rome. Actually, its most interesting use is lining as a heat insulator the walls of Turkish baths. The mind boggles at what its most uninteresting use is.
Well, it's sandstone. It's a crowd, or it's a bruise under the toenail. The toenail. Lance Percival.
Talk. Yes, yes. Well, I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what I think and make a fool of myself. I'm not sure that Dr. Johnson ever said Mampus to anybody, except possibly Ben.
He might have.
Might have. Well, he possibly said it. But I think that it wouldn't be a porous sandstone. I think somebody immediately thought, Mampus, that sounds Latin, we better put that near Rome. So I'm not entirely convinced by that. However, I am convinced that even if it's a bluff or if it's true, there are millions of viewers who'd be pleased to know whether they have Mampuses under their toenail, once and for all. So I feel I ought to ask Frank to declare himself.
And so he shall, true or bluff.
I am happy to say that they don't have things under their toenails.
Oh, splendid. Or they may have things, but it's certainly not called that quite so. Who gave the true definition? It was Sheila Hancock. It was a crowd. And Dr. Johnson may well have said it. 4-2, pretty good score there. Hisen or no Heisen, I dare say, Geoffrey Wheeler, you'll tell me.
Well, yes, it'll be more familiar to Frank, this word, than really and to me, because he, of course, will remember it well. The verb heisen was once quite common in old manuscripts and indentures. Well, it's not so familiar to me. I'm not that old, and I'm not in dentures. Not yet, anyway. But it has nowadays been supplanted by the word meaning to cajole, you see, to cajole, meaning to persuade by flattery, which, let's face it, is what Frank's been doing throughout this programme. Yeah. And I'm endeavouring to do now with only little success. However, in Henry VIII's time...
you begin again. Splendid, splendid, there's more.
You see, in certain unscrupulous employers tried to heisen apprentices away from their masters, and they could be fined for doing so. And Henry himself, when wooing, as he so frequently was not above getting a minstrel to serenade his amour, simply to heisen the effect.
Dear.
Yes, well, I like Chapter 2 best. More next week. Percival.
Heisen, well, of course, will be familiar to all three of you who know anything about Japanese porcelain, because there's nothing really quite to match the exquisite decoration and fine workmanship of Heisen, as they pronounce it over there, because it comes from the province of Heisen in Japan, and all the main potteries in that area all make Heisen, and that is why it's called Heisen. Heisen. Thank you very much. Carry on.
I'm just wondering whether the Japanese imitate the English.
Yes.
Oh, but I won't wonder so long. Isobel Black.
Heisen is a word from the Manx language. It's leaked into the Oxford Dictionary, and it means the number 8. Manx language is the language which is spoken on the Isle of Man, in case you're concerned. If you'd like to know, the numbers from 1 to 10 are Endar Tyler, Gotsa Quint Sepa, Forel, Heisen, Nepa Dek.
Oh, very well done. That's frightfully good. Very good. What if it's true or not? Anyway, it's Japanese porcelain, it's the number 8, it is the act of cajoling. Frank Muir.
I see you glancing anxiously at the clock. Do you want a fast or a slow
no,
answer?
I should have given you a nudge, my dear chap, I assure you. No, he's just waving his hand at me, he's just friendly.
Normal speed answer.
Yes.
No, Geoffrey, this cajoling, because Henry VIII couldn't have cajoled his love in a song. That didn't make sense. Lance's Japanese pottery was very funny, but I don't think that was that. I think it's Isobel's.
Decided?
She said it was the number 8, didn't she, in that language?
Yes.
In Manx. True or bluff? Yowza! No,
I think it was the pottery. Doing that, I think.
Can we have the true one, do you think?
I think Japanese Heisen have last.
Oh, he's doing it yet. It is Japanese porcelain, and we just, as we did last week, 4-3, we just have a nice time for the last one, and see if we can't make it a draw. Carto, Frank Muir.
Carto is a sled, pulled sled, thing on ice, pulled by things, actually peasants or ponies, whatever's handy, and Polish chaps and round about the Polish border used to pull all over cartwood and game and stuff on it. That's it.
Richard.
If you go up the ramparts of Edinburgh Castle, you'll find quite a lot of cartos littered all around the place. They were 17th century cannon.
Well, they don't make you gloomy, though, do they?
I get very depressed at the thought of 17th century cannon.
Well, yes, I dare say one might. Sheila Hancock.
A carter is a floating barrier laid across the mouth of a river to stop hostile ships coming up. It's really...
That's a good idea. That's clever.
I didn't think of it. It was the 16th century, I think. No, 17th century. And there were trunks of trees bound together by iron. The Dutch used them on one particular war, but I can't remember which one it was. But it's a barrier for stopping ships coming up rivers.
OK, well, it's a floating barrier, as you say. A sledge, a cannon. Geoffrey.
Well, I think we're agreed on this. Whether we stand or fall together remains to be seen. We don't think it's a floating barrier, beautifully as it was described. The cannon, we don't accept, I'm afraid. In any case, I'd rather not dwell on it. You were clearly deeply moved. So we're going to come to happier things. The jingle of sleigh bells, the cry of happy, Polish, I think, children in the snow, playing with a carto.
And the smell of game, very high aboard it, too. Not so cheerful. But anyway, Frank Muir, true or bluff?
Niet.
Well done. We have just nice time to hear the true definition.
Think of all of them nestling under Edinburgh Park.
So it meant all he said, though I dare say less emotionally than he put it. They are a species of cannon. 5-3, without any question, Frank Muir's team wins. We shall be returning next week with a few more old boilers from the Oxford English Dictionary. Until when, goodbye from Lance Percival, Richard Wattis, Isobel Black, Sheila Hancock, Geoffrey Wheeler, Frank Muir, and good night. Good evening. Call my bluff. Well, at least I didn't waste what I was going to say. Have to think of something fresh. Nearly got it out.
Clock running.
What happened, actually?
It's our fault. It wasn't you.
No, I mean, I literally would like to know what happened.
45 seconds. There was a problem in the gallery. I'll elaborate later on if you want to know. $30 seconds. $20. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Into song before the programme's over. Not unless inspiration strikes, the most unlikely to.
Right, run the clock. Run the clock.
Sound problem, eh? Good.
Shall I stop the clock, or do you want it run? Right. Thank you. 45 seconds. Doesn't often happen this, ladies and gentlemen. 30 seconds. $20. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Good evening. Call my bluff where few tongues are smoother than Frank Muir's.
All my team are writers, both, or two and a half, including me. Both are writers. My first is a novelist. 4 out, 1 in the pot, called Beautiful. Here is, most aptly, Rachel Billington. Beautiful isn't a word I'd necessarily connect with my next guest, who is, in fact, one of the funniest writers around at the moment of the younger generation. Deputy editor of Punch, Alan Coren.
And Ireland's answer to Muir AF, Patrick Campbell.
And my first guest is a distinguished actress who plays rather fraught parts. In fact, she's a lovely, funny lady called Gwen Watford. and the other plumber, had a face well known to everybody, little bubbly drinks and what's my line. Well, who should it be but William Franklyn? There he is.
Ring-a-ling, and we get the first word. Now, the first word is Flitwight, and Frank Muir and his team are going to define Flitwight 3 different ways. 2 are false, 1 is true. That's the one that Patrick Campbell and his company will try and pick out. So, Frank, what about this word?
Flitwight sounds like something you spray on tennis shoes, doesn't it? It isn't actually. Flitwight is a coal, in fact, just the opposite to tennis shoes. Sort of coal which was mined in the Glasfryn area, 10 miles north of Pontypool. High calorific value, easy to handle, rather expensive, and was liked by the Great Western Railway.
Well.
Alan Coren.
Well, fortunately, we live in fairly permissive times, else I shouldn't be able to say this word at all. And there's every chance it wasn't said ever on medieval television. The word being one way of saying a flighty girl. A flitwight is someone who quite clearly flits from white to white. In fact, it's cognate with flighty, flapper, all those sorts of words. Even now I can't think of a modern equivalent, but let's leave it at someone who moves from man to man, not for any other reason of gain or whatever, but because she likes it.
Rather healthy, yes.
Rachel Billington, your turn.
Flitwight could be described as a folding fold, because it's a portable sheepfold, so that when a shepherd wants to move his sheep to new pastures, he can do a flit with his flitwight.
They've gone quiet.
And sheep with them. It was coal, I think you said.
Coal, yes.
Coal, and it was a portable sheep for one you can pick up, a sheepfold you can pick up and take away with you, and a baggage, a saucy baggage, one who flits from man to man. Patrick.
Yes. Well, we dismiss instantly, as usual, the captain of the other team. It's Frank Muir talking dribble about a kind of... Or are you?
Yes, forget it.
It sounds too kind of apposite back there. Split white. And the... In the middle of the definition...
Rude. Someone said something rude.
Johnny? Yes, Johnny, please.
Or doom. Not me. But
Up to speed. We're flying here.
And my other guest is the face that is known to you all far and wide, an actor, a kind of general knockabout comedian, Mr. William Franklyn.
That's nice. I like that. I should like to see the first word, and lo, it is flocks. What is going to happen is that flocks is going to be defined 3 different ways by Frank Muir and his team. Two of them are, I should say, false. One is true. That is the one that Patrick Campbell and his team are hoping to pick out. I wonder if they will. Frank, what about this word flocks?
Flocks is, in fact, a verb, to flocks, and it really describes the action of saltation. Now, I could leave it there, which would be very unkind, because saltation doesn't mean to sprinkle salt on celery. Saltation means to leap about. So lambs, to bound about and leap about. So lambs flocks in the springtime. Human beings flocks in the springtime. If an income tax bill arrives or a school, I might flocks at any moment.
Have you?
Well, yes, that's most convincing. Alan Coren?
Well, now, those of you given to strolling into stables at odd moments and catching them off guard may well have seen a groom attacking a horse with what looks like a cane. What he's in fact doing is currying this horse with a flocks. Get all the rubbish that horses collect in the various private parts of their equine anatomy. It's a long piece of whalebone, split and ridged, that you curry a horse with to take out the rubbish.
Having removed the rubbish, you then eat the horse, of course. Now, I think it's Rachel.
Desperation.
Phlox is a very, very unpleasant being, a sort of hobgoblin, a gnome, an evil sprite that lives in the countryside, in hedgerows, and very, very dangerous, and comes out and makes very unpleasant overtures to cows and other animals. And if someone rushed in from their garden and said, "There's a phlox in my phlox," that would be very, very bad news indeed.
Well, it would, yeah. Knock it all over. It's kind of a goblin, and it's a brush for currying horses with, and it's jumping up and down, that kind of thing. What do you say, Patrick?
Yeah. It certainly isn't leaping about. Just a moment, please. Yeah. You do? Oh, Lord. I don't think it's leaping about. The flux, it doesn't... a flux, a sense of motion, it isn't that kind of verb, a transitive verb to flux, intransitive verb to flux, both. A goblin, a flux. I think it's a kind of piece of whalebone for removing rubbish from horses, but I don't really. I think it's a kind of goblin.
The goblin. Oh, the goblin. That Rachel Billington spoke of that. Was it true or bluff?
It's a bluff, isn't it? Oh, no.
So no, it wasn't that. Was it the comb or was it the jumping? Let's know. True definition.
Oh, no, Frank. No. After all, that's...
Oh, yes. Yes. Flux is the act of jumping, or saltation. And we have, for our next word, bambosh, and it's Patrick to have a whack at it.
Bambosh is a kind of rather superior calico canvas mixture. First of all, woven by the Persians. No. Round about 1880, notes there, notes. The British government decided to make uniforms out of bambosh on the grounds that the lads in the Sudan wearing woolen uniforms were dying of heat and thirst. Consequently, they all got dressed in bambosh.
That was a very serious definition. Now we've come to William Franklyn.
Well, we're in the presence of bambosh because it's the end product of a bamboozler. It's the modus operandi of a con man. It's codswallop. It's just a lot of very doubtful material. This definition happening to be true, therefore, does not qualify as bambosh.
Neatly turned, yes. Gwen Watford.
Well, your average Zulu occasionally takes a pinch of snuff. Or some stuff that looks like snuff. But this brown powder is not, in fact, tobacco dust. It's the powdered root of the thorn bush. And it's called bambosh. And Zulu warriors often take a pinch of snuff before going into battle in order to make them fighting mad.
Well, it gives the enemy one up. They must be all sneezing, I suppose. Ooh, throwing their assegais, tissue. Well, it's Zulu snuff. It's a piece of chicanery, and it's good old British calico, by George. Frank?
We're a little split. Can we have 2 seconds?
No,
yes, right. Right. We're not entirely 100% with this verdict. So I'll let you know whether you're right. Well, you can see, can't you, when they put the things up. But we don't think it's stuff that Zulus thrust up their snitch. It wouldn't excite them to battle so much as to sneeze. So it's either... I don't think the British Army ever went into calico as early as 1880, or did anything as sensible as that in 1880. So it must be the codswallop.
That was spoken by William Franklyn, so to speak. True or bluff? It really is what he said, that it's a kind of confidence trickster's patter. 2-0, goodness me. Midland.
All right.
Alan Coren, your go.
Very difficult one to do, very embarrassing, very personal. Midlag is an obsolete word, which I haven't heard of it, for an umbilical or umbilical cord. It's embarrassing because I don't know whether it's umbilical or umbilical.
It's umbilical.
Is it? Well, it's that. But in its original uncut version, if you like, it's the cord before it's severed at the lower and the upper end, whichever is the sooner. That's what it is, midlag.
Or the shorter.
Or the shorter.
Rachel Billington.
A midlag is, or was rather, Richard II's idea of very snappy dressing. It's a kind of tabard, a sort of tunic, which reaches just about the knee, so you might say it was a sort of mid-leg maxi tabard.
Sounds charming. Worn by the right person, looked rather nice. Frank Muir.
Midlag is a thing well known in the Middle Ages to old lags. It's there's a lot of brawling and being turfed out of alehouses round about the beginning of the 14th century. So they instituted midlag, which is in fact a fine for brawling, fisticuffs or violent behaviour.
Right. So it's a fine for brawling if you indulge in rowdy behaviour. It's the umbilicus or it's a longish tabard. William.
The lagging job.
No, yes.
Well, I'll talk in general terms for a few minutes to give my team time to sort of go over it in detail. This umbilical cord, obviously, this idea of lagging that goes on, it suggests it's, in fact, probably the Eskimos used it quite a lot, but it's too easy, actually.
No, please, Peter.
No, I'd quite like him to join in on these things, because they're social occasions, aren't they, really? The other thing which is lagging for legs, which is this lagging of Richard II, it sounds so likely and so reasonable that I have to doubt it slightly. I quite like the idea, if it's all right with you, Skipper, of this fisticuffs, which has got nothing to do with anything.
There's nothing appropriate about it, so I'd like to go for Frank.
Well, he did say that it was a fine, a kind of medieval fine for indulging in a brawl. True on Bluff, Frank?
I forget. Looks too happy.
Oh!
So, no fine for brawling, mid-lag. What was it then? We really need to know. Someone must tell us.
No!
Double bluff.
Certainly.
Let's fight back,
Mid-lag is a rather fetching, long tabard. 3-0, goodness me. All right. Whatever way I say it, someone else will say it another way. Macalow. Macalow? William Franklyn.
Macalow, so pronounced. Mac, Scottish, allow from allowance, a Scottish allowance. It's a traditional thing. It's an allowance given to foster parents to benefit the foster children. It's a very old tradition. It could be money, of course. It could be a jar of jam. It could be a hamster in a cage. Or it could be a year's subscription to the Radio Times. It could be something quite enlightening. That is Macalow.
Gwen, your go.
The Macallow was the name given to a penny farthing, the prototype bicycle, because it was invented by a Mr. James Macallow, who was an Edinburgh carriage builder. And the name penny farthing became so popular that Mr. Macallow is now relatively unknown.
Well, that's rather... There's a strain of pathos in that, wasn't there? Patrick?
I picture a night in steamy old Mississippi. And the paddle wheel boat is going down there. A ladder playing cards. I one of them there with a big black hat. It's flat on top with a big brim. This is a kind of hat called Macallow. Invented, or worn, not invented, but worn by a gambler called Macallow on Mississippi. Riverboat.
Dear me, and that was had thrilling moments, that bit. It's the black hat invented by Comrade Macallow. It's a penny farthing, and it's a present for a Scots foster child, and it can be any sort of present. Alan.
Oh dear, all that stuff about a jar of jam in a cage. It's the quadruple or quintuple bluff there, the thing so utterly daft. It may well actually be utterly daft. But I'm not very happy about the penny farthing bicycle, because it seems extraordinarily unlikely that if somebody had invented a bicycle as successful as a penny farthing, wouldn't have given his name to it. And I don't really like the black hat either, because it doesn't sound a Deep South name to me. I will go back to Bill Franklin's Scottish allowance. God forgive me.
Yeah.
I think it's that.
Well, that's what William Franklin said. Was he teasing, I wonder?
I think sincerity is probably getting the better of us.
Fantastic opening to the game, 4-0. Well. Now, what's the next one? Corny. Rachel Billington.
Ah, yes. If someone called you corny, even though it's spelt C-A-W-N-Y and not C-O-R-N-Y, you still ought to knock him down immediately, because it's a regional adjective, mainly used in Cambridgeshire, but could travel up here, which means mean, thrifty, ungenerous, all the characteristics which are particularly unpleasant. And apparently the citizens of Ely in Cambridgeshire are particularly noted for their corniness.
Right. Bang goes our viewing figures. Now, Frank.
What do you mean? The bang goes our viewing figures now, Frank?
You said it, not me.
Separated them a little. Corny is a unit for measuring land in Madras, India. A corny is 1.5 acres, about. Or to be exact, 47,673 square feet. I think you'll find, if you look in your reference book, that in 1863, 16,000 673 colonies were under irrigation in Madras.
Must have been a very satisfying thing. Alan.
Well, I can hardly bring myself to deliver the requisite expertise for this, because it really is so rotten with class. Anybody who knows about it ought to be taken out and nailed to the nearest whatever it is. Because corny is the sauce that you have with the more recherche shot game, heron, moorhen, small paddling water things that figure in children's stories, actually taken out and killed, roasted or broasted and served with corny. It's a sauce made of radishes, watercress, spices. That.
You're really making it sound awfully appealing. It's a sauce taken with recherche fowl. It's a measure of land, and it's being mean in Ely. Gwen.
Yes. It's very difficult indeed. I'm afraid, Rachel, I don't think that the people of Ely are corny. Don't go for that one. The Madras measure, I think Frank protested too much. He knew too much. He got too many statistics to back up his explanation. Do you think? Yes? Are you with me, Patrick?
We're trying like mad.
So I think I go for the sauce for the shot game from Alan.
Yes, it was he who said it too, Bluff.
Is it the end of a winning run?
It's right, is it?
Nothing to do with that at all. Much to do with something else. Now we shall learn.
One of the difficulties...
No, just do it.
One of the difficulties... One of the difficulties of this game is that you mustn't tell fibs when they're true, and learning those statistics, which are absolutely true, was very difficult.
Oh, forgive me.
Yes, you must be congratulated. Not only wants the point, he wants sympathy as well. So it's a measure of land, 5-0. How do you measure that? Burgie, or Bergie is the next one, Gwen Watford.
Bergie is merely a simple contraction of the word icebergy, which means something that has the characteristics or the look of an iceberg. So a frosty welcome would be called a bergie, and so would a bather whose torso was 9/10 under the water.
Be a dead bergie.
Rather chilly bergie. Patrick.
A berg is a temporary prisoner of war compound. Now the battle rages. Come along, for heaven's sake. The battle rages a mile away. The prisoners come back. They're put into a bergie. Mr. Winston Churchill of holy memory was placed in a bergie in a place called Escort outside Durban during the Boer War, and escaped from his bergie back home to London.
Typical of the man.
Typical of the man.
William.
A burgee is so pronounced than which there is no more useful tool in a coppersmith's bag. It is a mushroom-shaped piece of wood, over which is covered with leather. Sheets of copper are placed against it for the purpose of hammering them into shape. You use the hammer, also covered with leather, so that we have the mushroom-shaped burgee, the sheet of copper, and the leather-faced hammer. Burgee.
You do? Well, it's a temporary prisoner of war camp. It's coppersmiths necessary, or it's iceberg-like. Rachel, choose away.
Terrible blackmail. They both think it's one thing, and I think it's the other thing.
Often the way on this programme.
Because perhaps it's brilliant double bluff, but I felt that the first two were just too exotic, too exciting. I mean, they were blinding me with names, Winston Churchill, all this. That was Patrick's one, was somehow was too marvellous. I couldn't go for that. The icebergy was clearly to make us all laugh, and again, couldn't be straight. It has to be the very boring piece of... What is it, a mushroom-shaped piece of wood? I have to go for that. I'm sorry.
That was riveting.
I did it in a very boring way, too, I think. Don't you agree?
Sure.
Great stuff, Bob. Great stuff. Lovely.
Well, it isn't anything to do with that. Got to be to do with something. Have to know the true one now.
And who should it be?
Yes, indeed. Iceberg light.
One mark.
Actually, bergy means exactly what Gwen Watford said it means. It's like a berg or iceberg. Paggle is our next word, and it's Frank's turn.
Paggle. Very nice. Country word. It means a stick. In fact, almost anything, but usually a stick which is pushed up something to clear whatever's stuck up that something. So, for instance, a pipe cleaner is a paggle when you shove it up to get a bit of tobacco or blockage out of the way. And a drain cleaner's engine with the canes is a paggle. But a handkerchief isn't. You see, it's got to be something that you... Sheep's brush is a paggle.
Right. Yes, that's comprehensive knowledge there. And Alan Coren.
Extraordinarily dull verb. One of the dullest verbs you'll ever run across, just connected with a very simple process in the print industry of feeding rags and shredded old paper into a sort of hopper or pagler, where it's then remixed with water, turned back into bright new paper. Very simple.
Yes. Though by magic. Rachel.
Well, paggle is, now I know about it, one of my favourite words because it describes so accurately the idea of a fat stomach pushing out, or a shopping bag, a very full shopping bag. It means to push out, distended, something which is very fat and full. You can even use it in the sense of, you might say, I sort of paggle down the high street with my paggling shopping bag. If you get this feeling of fullness.
Comes not yet.
That's paggle.
Comes on after meals. It's a sort of pipe cleaner, and it's a bulging thing, and it's the mangling of rags by printers. Patrick.
Well, now, a feeling of fullness. Many, I was described it like, well, full, or pregnant, windy. I never had paggle. I was paggling down with my paggle in front of me. Rags, turning rags into paper. This is a highly scientific business. I've got an awful feeling that this tool for shoving things up to clear things that oughtn't to be there. But if I'm wrong, don't blame me, Frank.
You're choosing that, are you, Patrick?
Well, I think I kind of am in a way, yes.
All right, you coy
Yes,
thing.
we've done it, yes.
True or bluff, Frank?
It's true. Oh, no.
No pipe cleaner. What was it? Who gave the true definition of paggle?
Oh, not
unlikely as it may seem. It means to bulge. Fat, bulgy, swag-bellied, that sort of thing. And we have now the word polanka, score standing at 6-1. Patrick.
A polanka, it got 4 legs, it got a pig-like snout, a sawn-off tail like a cocker spaniel.
Poor thing.
It lives, a kind of rock badger that lives in the Peloponnese, Lower Turkey, and Crete. It's got a funny little thing. I happen to catch one, you can make a, not a pair of gloves, but one finger stored out of it. A rather gamey taste of kind of old pork.
Yes. What did you expect at the end of that? William?
Pole anchor is nautical tackle. It's a very simple system of pulleys with which sweating sailors raise heavy weights from one position and put them somewhere else. It dates back to the time of Henry VIII, and rather jocular fella at the time, suggested that there was always a pole anchor at the docks when Henry went down to inspect his navy, because to get him, obviously, from the shore up onto one of the ships required a pole anchor.
Thank you.
It's like rather amusing.
Gwen?
A pole anchor was an official who was often seen and heard in Saxony and Bohemia. He was a mixture of a beadle and a town crier, and his duties were to inform the populace of the laws and regulations. And he was equipped with a long white staff and a very loud voice.
So, it's a badger, which tastes of pork to those who are nasty enough to eat it. Serve them right. It's a lifting device, once employed by Henry VIII, and a beadle with a bell. Frank?
Anyone who made remarks about Henry VIII needing to be lifted up by a pole anchor would himself be poleaxed. No, I certainly have nothing to do with that. Whether... just look at the score if you feel like laughing, Paddy. Was a rotten thing to say, wasn't it? I don't think a beadle and town crier would be called in that particular word in Saxony or wherever it was. So therefore we're driven down to Paddy's long and excessively tedious thing about the rock badger. Which tasted gamey, I suppose, of Ludo or something. Flash the card, Pad.
Let's have it, Patrick. True or bluff, my lad?
A very grave error there. Thank you very much.
Touch too much of the gloat there, Frank, I feel. Who gave us the true definition? Yes, indeed. I don't suppose for 1 minute it was used for lifting Henry VIII, but everything else he said was true. Well, it might well have been true, that bit too. But here we come to our last one, which is libs. Alan.
I was very much against including this one, wasn't I? Because it's
yes.
straightforward for anybody who's a Latin scholar. It is plain and simple. Libs is Latin for the southwest wind. And that's all. There's no way of embellishing that. That's what it is.
Fairly swiftly, Rachel, if you please.
A lib is a scurrily written lampoon, normally written in the 18th century. There are some pretty unpleasant examples which aren't right for the general viewing public tonight.
Quite right, too, yes. Frank?
Libs, not very pleasant, kind of skin infestation found in rodents. You can look, if you really want to, at the base of the hairs, and it's sort of crusty, not very pleasant.
Right, it's southwest wind, a lampoon, and a skin disease of rodents. Bill Franklyn, fairly swiftly, I believe.
Oh, me. What was that first one? I think you said it was you.
Now I must ask you to decide.
The first one was Alan's. Was what?
Yes.
Southwest wind. Southwest. Yes. Do you want me to decide straight away?
Yep.
A southwest wind.
True or bluff, Alan?
It's true, isn't it?
I knew I was against having the thing in.
Well done.
So that was really rather a noble ending, having halved the distance between the teams. Very well done, Patrick. But however, at 6-3, certainly Frank's team has won. Back with a cargo of cheap tin trays from the Oxford English Dictionary next time. Until then, goodbye from Alan Coren. William Franklyn. Rachel Billington. Gwen Watford. Frank Muir.
Goodbye.
Patrick Campbell.
Good night.
And goodbye. Good evening. Given the feathers, wouldn't he make a lovely Red Indian? Yes, Patrick Campbell.
What's wrong with him? Really, what's he get to my assistance? We have an actress of charm and distinction, a very lovely mind called Gwen Watford. There she is. And we have he's been everywhere. He's done it all on the boards, in the film studio, the television screen. Mr. William Franklyn.
And the Clint Eastwood of Manchester, Frank Muir.
Why Clint Eastwood? Why Manchester?
Because William Franklyn told me to say it, that's why.
Oh, did he? Well, you can shut up. Tonight, our victorious team back again. Of course, first guest is a novelist who is very beautiful, and in fact her new novel is going to be called Beautiful, Rachel Billington. And with the aid of a corkscrew, which was handy at the time, we've got away from the deputy editor of Punch's desk, Alan Coren.
It's getting very amusing even before the game begins. Let's see what the first word is. Gamberlock is the first word, and Patrick Campbell and his team are going to define Gamberlock 3 different ways. 2 are false, 1 true. That's the one that Frank Muir and company are going to try and pick out. So, Patrick, what of this word?
A Gamberlocky, a kind of rather fancy hacking jacket which you wear if you're hacking round about Damascus. If you're cubby around Damascus, you wear a Gamberlocky. A kind of bright red, buttoned up to the throat, rather severe collar, and that's it.
Splendid, splendid. William Franklyn?
A Gamberlock is a group of basking whales. A group of whales behaving like partly submerged submarines, all puffing sprouts of spray out of those holes in the top of their backs. That's not actually, I believe, the anatomical description, but it'll do for the moment. The sad part of this tale is that blue whales often huddle in Gamberlocks, and unfortunately it makes them very easy prey for whalers. It's rather sad, that, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
It's certainly not very funny.
No, just...
Tear starts unbidden to the eye. Gwen?
Funny.
A Gamberlock is an ungentlemanly feat performed by the feet. It's a scissor-like kick that you use against your opponent in order to topple him onto his back. And so knights in armour are particularly vulnerable to Gamberlocks, because once they're toppled, they lay on their backs like great big tortoises, unable to get up again.
Not very funny for them. It's a kick. It's a riding jacket. It's a school